So welcome to CloudSec 2020. My name is Mick McClooney and I'm the technical lead for Trend Micro across Australia and New Zealand. And I'm here today with Liam Zeidlitz.
Oh mate, well done.
That's okay. That's the first time I've got his surname right.
I'm impressed.
And so Liam and I are here to talk to you about the real cost of security in the cloud. So we were thinking about the kind of problems that customers have with going to the cloud and that security function in the cloud and understanding that new world and its challenges. And so in framing up those challenges, some of the things that we were thinking about were really, what are the key difficulties you have with security in the cloud? And we'll first talk about the challenges, and then we'll kind of get into what the costs are around those challenges and facing those challenges, because it's a security layer. You've got to have it, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't matter whether you're in the cloud or not. Things have changed, but you still need the security. So, Liam, you're out there every day with customers. You're talking to customers about their problems, and really talking to them about the difficulty of moving to the cloud. We sort of came up with these four things to talk about. So perhaps you could sort of illustrate some of the examples here with some of the stuff that you've been finding out from customers.
Yeah, sure. No, happy to, Mick. I think the first thing, as you said, we definitely want to sort of be talking about, what is the cost of security in the cloud, and not just the cost of doing it wrong, but also the cost of doing it right. But to your point, if we want to do it right, we need to understand, what are the things that make it so tough? And to your point, as we've shared on the screen here, there's a few. So, what we tend to hear from the customers, and when they're talking about lack of visibility, is they're not understanding or seeing, who's logging into their cloud environment, what resources they're spinning up, and what's the impact of those resources within their organization, whether that's from a risk or a cost perspective. It's a big concern.
So I think that the thing that cloud providers say, it's easy. And actually it is quite easy. It's probably never been as easy to spin up a lot of IT infrastructure in one go from a cloud account. So to that extent, it's easy and a lot of people can probably do it. But the key thing is having some control around that. And I suppose we talk to customers and we get the feeling that they feel it's a bit like the Wild West to some extent, that your traditional security role that's overlooking what was you had a moat and a perimeter and a data center, and you kind of had control about who went in, what got turned on, how it got turned on, who could access it, and you had some firewalls to look at. And maybe some of those things, they're still there, aren't they? But they work. The controls are different, and different people have the controls.
Sure. And that's a really key point, right? It's who today in the cloud, who has the keys to the kingdom compared to in the past. And it's a really different landscape, which is exactly what you said there. And then the second thing, that we're seeing again, sort of on screen there is, on the reporting side and the auditing side. So what customers are needing to do or wanting to do is really have that ability to be able to understand, well, again, what's that context of going on in the environment? How do I share that with my leadership team or our board? Because we know that, through research, either our own or through third parties, that, more and more board conversations are being focused on the cloud and the security and compliance posture of the cloud as well. So again, a big issue.
Obviously security in general, it's become a board level topic, and maybe, going back a few years, it wasn't quite as prevalent as it was. But cloud has certainly cloud is part of the IT conversation now. And I think my reflection is that these things start off innocently. There's a small cloud project, it rapidly develops, suddenly it becomes very serious, it becomes very production. Suddenly you've got not just one AWS account or one Azure account, but you've got multiple AWS and Azure accounts. and you've got people who aren't in security making what were effectively security decisions. And so I think that to talk to cloud skills and knowledge, that's am I security aware, am I security control aware in the cloud? Lack of visibility is not just where and what, it's who. It's like your control about identity and who's going in. And the speed and velocity, as we know, is rapid.
Yes.
Right? So I think that makes it even more difficult. You've got a rapidly evolving cloud. And when I say that, that's not really rapidly evolving within your own infrastructure. That's also the cloud services themselves.
Exactly. They're bringing out new services. They're making changes to existing services, maybe changing policies. And you're right, you know, the lack of cloud skills and knowledge, then coupled with the speed and rate of change, it's overwhelming for many of our customers.
And all of these things will have a security implication in a way. Inevitably, I mean, there's going to be some element of security awareness that should be deployed with any of this.
And actually, Mick, just before we move on, I know we haven't sort of brought them up on the slide, but I think two other important sort of notes or remarks to make and sort of feedback from customers has been, you know, security isn't the core business of that organization, which isn't something that, you know, can be understated. You know, you've got, you know, a bank which is providing their financial services, you've got real estate business, you've got manufacturing. Security isn't their core business, so I'll let you.
Well, to be fair, you know, banks they tend to have a quite thick layer of security, but the real estate business, you know, maybe not so much. And cloud is certainly becomes part of that. And I agree that is building a security function your core thing to do? No.
Exactly right. And then there's that trade-off of investment and so on. I think the final thing as well is, again, we tend to hear a bit of an over-reliance on the cloud providers themselves. And again, you know, it's okay, nice segue. Tell me about this slide.
Well, there is. So just because you're using a cloud service, what do you mean we will share cloud responsibility? So Brianna of Taft is equally shocked as you are that the cloud providers can't do it all.
Sure.
So to illustrate that, the cloud providers talk of security of the cloud and in the cloud. So how do these conversations go with your customers, Liam?
Yeah, look, so I think there's a few prongs to this. So I think what the cloud providers do well is you know, as we can see again, you know, they've got a good model here. They try and make it clear for customers. They educate them. But what we find from our customers is there's still, and again, not for all of them. I don't want to blanket term anyone, but there is still within a large portion of customers really that understanding of what responsibility does sit with them and that security in the cloud of their customer data, of their IP. Maybe, you know, their identity and access management. These are the things that they have to set up themselves. Understanding where that line is really, really difficult. And I think another thing that sort of compounds that sometimes is the fact that, you know, a lot of the cloud services providers do have some really strong native security capability as well, which is supporting customers. So blurring those lines a little bit and making it difficult for them to understand.
I think that, you know, they're going to run a data center more securely than anybody else. They're going to put real resources into it. But you've hired a bit of that, and that bit that you've hired, you're running some sort of public interface on it, right? Even if it's just for you to go in and develop something, and you have to think about that, because when you're running, whatever you're running in there becomes your responsibility, doesn't it? Like
exactly.
That's your data, and that's your and because it can happen so easily. And I think that's what customers struggle with is like 500 AWS accounts, visibility across there, who's accessing, who's doing those things. Could you answer, if you to put a question out there to the audience? I don't have a poll, but if somebody in your cloud environment today opened up an Azure blob or an S3 bucket and made it open to the world, i.e. any IP address could get at it, would you know? Yeah.
That's,
I mean,
good
challenge,
and I think point two to that is not just would you know how to fix it if you do find out, and I think that's another challenge there.
So let's go on to a quick slide about the cost of getting it wrong. And I think we can talk about the costs. I think we talked about the challenges, but we really want to get into, okay, so we need some security.
Sure.
So the cost of getting it wrong, this is a bit of a fear, uncertainty and doubt slide, but it really, I think it's good to understand that even experts and expert companies in Perva, a security company, had an internal compute instance misconfigured and publicly accessible for many months. This is all public knowledge, by the way. CenturyLink, open database, Uber, you know, I don't know if you follow the story, but it was a bit of a story around what happened, how they tried to cover it up, et cetera, et cetera. But these companies, Uber, born in the cloud, of the cloud, like that was their very making. Yeah.
Yeah, they're ones and you know, as you said there, there's many examples out there, and you know, these are just three that we've sort of found interesting to talk about, given the background and the context of these organizations, and they're the ones that you expect to be doing it right. A couple of other interesting points as well is, I know we haven't sort of mentioned Capital One, for example. They've just had to pay, I think it was 80 million in fines, and I also read an IBM report in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, where they were saying the average cost of a cloud breach is costing organizations between sort of 3.7 to 3.9 million dollars. So there's significant repercussions, right?
Yeah.
And that's just what we can measure around costs. Yeah. Let's also not forget brand trust for customers. How do we measure that? Okay. What's the impact of that?
That's true. Personally, I'm a bit doubtful. There's a lot of figures around the breach costs X, whatever. Sure. But at the end of the day, without wanting to reflect the figures here, there is an impact. I mean, there's a brand impact, and there's a dollar impact, and there's a cost. So then we moved on to, right, so let's talk about building the cloud security function and what that is going to cost you, and we tackled that with how you can do it. And we came up with kind of, well, there are basically three methods, right? And you talk, if you're talking to a customer, I suppose they are evaluating which way is the best for them. So this first one, very attractive to DevOps people. It's like, I've got some open source tools, I'll spin these Absolutely. Up, we can look after this stuff. This is a valid way of going forward, right? And you know these customers, you've talked to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think to your point, all we're looking at doing here as an organization is really looking to remove that risk of being on the front page of the papers like we just advertised. Yeah. And to your point, there are multiple options. And in my own personal experience in our local market, I've spoken to a bunch of customers who have started on that initial journey of building themselves, and then at some point when they've come over to the Trend Micro solution, it's been around scalability, right, and resourcing and costs, and there became a point where wanting to make sure that they manage those I guess their resources and their costs better, and also make sure that they had the right level of visibility, and that sort of pushed them to move towards that secondary option that we can see there.
So I think, to be clear, that first option is an option, and people start out that way. They go, right, I've got some open source tools. They'll look at my cloud environment. They can check for certain things. They can look at costs. They can look at various security holes. They can scan for vulnerabilities, and that's all good. But as your complexity, what we find, I think, is as your complexity builds in the cloud, and what you're doing, or you're putting more production stuff to the cloud, you find that's a bigger beast to maintain and run. And then suddenly you're developing this software function that's non-core. Yes. It's a security management function. You go, well, okay. And I think we've run into customers who've gone, it just became a bit too awkward. So, and I think that's, and that's why we had the conversation. Sure, they go, well, how else can we do it? So to talk about the second option, third-party tool. So all wrapped up, here's a package that's going to look after me, right? It will, and what are the things you'd consider on a third-party tool? If I said to go to, let's ignore your Trend Micro and say, I'm on the market. What am I looking for in a tool?
I think, what customers are looking for, again, this is anecdotally from conversations that I've had and the team have had, but the first one is what level of visibility are we getting, because it's different per tool set, right? Whether we're building it ourselves or using third party, what is the breadth and depth of coverage we have across those cloud environments that we're using? That's right. Definitely up there as number one. Number two would be around that, well, yes, it's providing me the insight on what's happening. Is it enabling me to fix that? Whether it's through auto remediation or whether it's through manual remediation guides, we need the how-to component to be able to move our posture along from where it is today to where we want it to be. There's many others, but I would sort of say one or two more I'll call out if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Is the real-time impact. They want to be able to see what's happening in their environment as soon as it happens, because the risk of not seeing that is too much for, you know, a lot of skill. I'll let you jump in because I know.
So if I say that I am CISO, right?
Yep.
And you can give me an alert when somebody opens an S3 bucket to the world.
Yep.
That maybe that's useful for that could be one indication, right? And that's what the open source tool could probably give you that.
Yep.
The third party tool will definitely give you that. I think let's talk about the third option, because I think the third option is kind of like security is not my bag, or cloud security is not like, could I outsource it to a third party? And I think, yes, you could, right? So in the tool, just make sure the tool's giving you the triggers and indicators and reporting and compliance that you need, right? And if you're using multi-clouds, just make sure it stretches across all of them. But then in the outsourcing to the third party, I think the challenges are different. Right?
Yeah, I think the only point that organizations need to be cognizant on is, are they also outsourcing the risk? And that's something that, you know, they would need to think about and debate with the provider, because, you know, we know, and we work with a lot of providers who are using third-party tools to support that service that they're providing. And then I think the additional value that they'll provide is obviously the services component as well, right? So I think the key message here is there are multiple options. We've obviously called out 3 of them, which are probably the best ones we've seen work. None probably more so right than the other, but just right for that organization at that time. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think the thing
being
that
agnostic here.
the thing that would drive me actually is probably to go back to you know, Uber and CenturyLink and that turns up in the front page of the newspaper, and you're in front of the board and they say, why won't this happen to us? And you can go, well, because, you know, I have the security control in place and it's real time and it alerts me and my team if they make this mistake, leaving an instance open, leaving a database open to the world, opening up a new AWS account. So you have a really good view of your infrastructure. I think that's
a nice segue to.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think to me, that's about getting it right. But you imagine you're on the spot and they ask you, why isn't this us? Tell me why this isn't us. And you have to explain what you did right. So let's talk about getting it right. And the key elements to getting it right. And I think, again, you're talking to customers about this. They are discussing with us where it's going wrong, where they're not perhaps, where the security tool is, for want of a better word, creating friction or a bit of a pain, and how we can work in a way that, you know, how we can work in a way that the company's working. Because security is not the function, right? Security is the layer you need, but it's not the function.
And the first point here is huge, right? Collaboration and integration. So, you know, where we're seeing customers who are getting it right the most, it is those who have those cross-business unit relationships. So where we're talking about cloud, talking about DevOps, talking about security, cross collaboration on what it is they need to go to do and achieve. Essentially, they have aligned goals, right? And then they're taking each other on the journey to be able to get to where they need to go. So that's a massive one.
So what does that look like in an organization that's getting it right? That looks like the developer who's doing a lot of the cloud work, right, is talking to ops and taking on security as part of their portfolio.
I think in a really mature world, it's called DevSecOps. And I think, you know, where organizations are wanting to sort of get to that is it's what you described there, of better conversations, bringing in the right units at the right time, ensuring goals are aligned and moving forward.
But that's about collaboration, and collaboration is about visibility across those teams of the security goals, and all feeling they're kind of responsible for getting there with those. And, you know, exactly. I think that, so that talks a bit about visibility too. And I think, you know, standards and reporting are what drives the elements of this solution, right? So you've got to look at those if you like, those pillars of requirements and go, is whatever I'm doing, be it a third party outsource, a tool I'm buying, or my internal development, is it giving me the reporting I need, and is it achieving a standard? And I think, you know, compliance is a layer on that, isn't it? When the auditors come in for compliance, you've got point-in-time compliance, but we talk about real-time compliance. We talk about growing maturity in security, and you know, something shows you how you're improving in your security journey.
And we haven't even spoken about preventative as well,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about deployed instances in the cloud. For those mature organizations, they're bringing in preventative controls into the way that they do cloud, the way they deliver code, the way they do CI/CD. So, and again, you know, from a mature tool, that's what you'd want it to be supporting with as well.
Absolutely, for sure. So there's getting it right. We talked a bit about getting right, and then we talked a tiny bit about compliance and auditing. Really important element here. If you're facing an audit, and we've got some great tracks actually on the security audit coming up and how to prepare it for it. So look at those. But what's your view? What's the customer view of what are they loving about this? You know, so what do they need?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a few points there, but I think you know, the first one is that the value of being continuously compliant versus a point-in-time audit. Being continuously compliant gives you that ongoing visibility of where you're at continuously. So what that means is anytime you deviate from the position you want to be, which may be 100% compliant, maybe 90% compliant, who knows? But anytime you deviate from that, it gives you the opportunity to bring you back on track at that moment in time, rather than waiting 12 months, 24 months for a manual audit to take place, which one can be quite expensive, and that will probably lead into, you know, another one of the points of actually reducing the cost of that audit. But two, it also reduces the, I guess, the technical debt, that sort of that servicing, and also the overall posture that you're going to be at that moment in time, if that makes sense.
So a lot of automation in that, obviously. Yeah. So what would have been a human compliance audit with, you know, actually detailed human generated reports, we've now moved to an automated real-time compliance tool that can generate reports all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know from experience and you know, we won't name any customers, and I'm sure if they're listening in, they'll know who they are, but we can see the, you know, the APRA report we've got there for the CPS 234. We've had financial services organization use our solution here to provide that visibility to the regulator. Same with the ACCC with the open banking assessment, which we've also got, which not on the screen, but another automation that we can provide around compliance.
So I guess, and the other thing, coming back to choosing a tool or choosing your own way, how are you going to produce the report against these compliance standards, NIST, APRA, CIS, etc.? And how important is that to you? Now, if you might be audited on it, so that's one reason, but the other reason is, hey, it's a good measure of security maturity, right? These are good things to do.
And, you know, for small environments, you know, you might be making, say, hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings on audits. We've seen that in independent reports. For larger enterprise organizations, it can be millions. So significant cost reduction and saving opportunities.
Yeah. So if you find that if you find a tool that can do what you're previously doing with a bunch of auditors, that's going to be a cheaper way forward. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So moving on, I think, you know, there is lots of advice from the cloud providers about well-architected frameworks, shared responsibility models, you know, what you need to do. So I think that's all well and good, but you've got to read that advice, you've got to understand that advice, you've got to put that advice into action, right? And you've then got to take and they do give really good advice. The well-architected framework on both the Azure and the AWS side, you know, have pillars, and they talk about all the good things to do in the cloud. I would say that the knowledge and skill you need to kind of internalize all that information, then turn it into your capability to do it is quite large, right? Yes. So this is where we're helping, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you know, what we're definitely agreeing with today is the opportunity around cloud for organizations out there, right? So much opportunity to, you know, expand on their services, innovate for their customers, add scalability, reap cost and security benefits from being in the cloud. But the key point is they need to be doing it right, and they need to be doing it right as quickly as possible, because chasing your tail in the cloud if you're trying to do security,
You won't catch up.
You're not going to catch up.
No.
So that's probably my takeaway and what I've heard from our customers.
So if we come back to the real cost of security in the cloud, I think if I was to summarize it, the real cost of security in the cloud is complying to these well-architected models written by the cloud providers themselves that say, well, you really ought to do X, Y, and Z, right? And doing X, Y, and Z and making sure that you're reporting on doing X, Y, and Z is probably your cost. And I think, you know, what we've tried to help you here with is 3 possible directions. You can build some stuff yourself, you can buy a tool, you can get a third party in. But in all of those, what is that? My advice would be if you're sat in front of the board and they go, why won't this happen to us, Mick? You've got a good answer. Thank you very much.
I would agree with that, yeah.
So thank you very much, Liam. This has been a great chat. I hope you found it useful. We'd love for you to join the many other sessions at CloudSec. So I think there's some sessions after us and some sessions before us. We're doing a lot of sessions in the cloud track here around similar sort of topics. And as I say, there's a great one about preparing for your audit. So please do look amongst the topics there for more.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Mick.
No problem, Liam. Thank you very much.